we did a lot of research into what social services was and, the sort of like the foster care system. And it's not great. It's really not great. We listened to a lot of stories. We did a lot of research on this. How credible is this? And I felt that like making the character have her own child on the way and knowing that if she stepped away for a minute and did not have this child placed properly, the system was going to swallow her up. And she didn't want that to happen. And I think that the character of Caitlin saw something in Patrick because, again, I'm writing this because I have the personal experience and I could see something, and again, this is not based on a true story, but I could see the humanity in what this was, the character. And I wanted her to tap into that and say, you can man up and you can do this.
Hello and welcome to Cinema Q&A. I'm your host, Chuck Rose, and this week's movie is Daruma. This is a project that is unique in many ways. It stars two disabled leads, but it's not about overcoming disability. Tobias Forrest and John Lawson have both won Film Festival awards for their performances in Daruma. And it is fair to say that this is a labor of love for them and writer-producer Kelli McNeil-Yellen and director-cinematographer Alex Yellen. For Kelli, it has been nearly 20 years in the making. Kelli and Alex join us tonight. Let's take a look.
Hey, that's my dad's watch.
And now it's mine.
What the hell is wrong with you? Mind your own damn business.
You're gonna pay for my car.
You can believe whatever you want.
I'm sorry, but I can't give you an advance on your disability payment.
You're gonna have to press enter and give me the money I need.
I'm gonna enter you behind out this door.
Are you familiar with a woman named Heather Parks?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Miss Parks stated in her will that she wants you to be the beneficiary of her life insurance policy until Camilla comes of age.
Who the hell's Camilla?
She's your daughter.
You said there's money? What do you want?
Cereal.
Hey! You just told me you were potty trained.
So how is it? You look a little out of your depth.
I found her playing in the street.
Get in here!
You're not fit to be a parent.
She either goes to live with her grandparents in Providence or she goes into foster care.
I don't have anyone else.
Can't just take off for a road trip for several weeks. Ask someone else.
I'm gonna drive like a grandpa the entire trip.
If it pisses you off, then yes.
You think this is the wrong decision, just say it.
She's the best thing that's ever gonna happen to you.
Oh, good shot. All right, here we go. Ready?
That tattoo on your back, what is it?
A Daruma doll. You make a wish, color in one eye, and color in the other eye when the wish comes true.
What'd you wish for?
Had my ear to the ground.
Stop
Just
it.
let her do it. She's my daughter.
Not for long.
Even though it's completely selfish, at least you are doing the right thing for once. For her sake.
You deserve more than what I can give you.
But I love you, Daddy.
You just don't walk away from love like that.
You said that when you let people into your life, you get hurt. You don't think about what you do to other people.
You hide in that chair. You can't fix that, but you can fix this.
What's wrong, Daddy?
I'm afraid of what she'll become if she stays with me.
Father and daughter. Nothing like it in the whole world.
It's time to introduce our guests, the writer-producer of Daruma, Kelli McNeil-Yellen in Los Angeles, California. Welcome to Cinema Q&A.
Thank you for having me.
And somewhere in the wilds of Kentucky, the director-cinematographer, Alex Yellen. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Chuck. Nice to meet you.
Thanks so much for doing this, both of you. We really appreciate it. Your film is quite different in many ways. Your leading actors, Tobias Forrest and John W. Lawson, are disabled, but it's not about overcoming disability. It's sort of the best years of our lives in the 21st century, but with a protagonist whose real flaws are not physical but psychological, and he's thrust into this paternal challenge that he's not at all mentally equipped to handle. Kelli, I want to ask you, as writer and producer, you have been with this project for a long time, nearly 20 years. What was the spark for this, and then what happened?
This obviously, people always ask me this question: why would you, an able-bodied woman, want to tell a story about two disabled men? Why would you want to do this? And I think the thing is that I was exposed to disability from a very early age. I grew up in an area where I went to the only school that taught ASL, so I grew up learning sign language, and I never found that to be othering. It was never different for me. But then in the early 2000s, I had a family member have a tragic accident, and their life was changed forever. And I suddenly noticed how different the world was for them. And I noticed that, the media portrayals that we saw always portrayed that dying was better than living with a disability. And I just thought that that wasn't right, and it wasn't fair, and that we could do better. So there's a very famous movie that came out around that time. I'm not going to say what it was, but I had a very different experience watching that movie. So I wanted to tell a story where, life goes on after an injury. It really does. That doesn't change the person's the personality or anything. They're the same person. So I wanted to tell a story about a person with a disability who was living their life, had emotional flaws, had these character flaws that weren't related to the physicalities. And I wanted to have a foil, and that's John Lawson's character, to Patrick's journey throughout the film. But that's really the impetus for the story. And you're right, I spent 17 years trying to get this together, and nobody wanted to make it because everybody was like, we should cast able-bodied actors to play these parts. And that was a hard red line for me and for Alexander, the director of the film. And also, if anybody hasn't figured it out, we are a husband and wife team. We are married. But that was really the hard line for us, is that we wanted to make this authentically, and nobody wanted to touch it. So we did it ourselves. And here we are.
Yes, it's quite a journey. Alex, according to IMDb, you have only 103 credits as a cinematographer. So you're learning. You'll get it.
Right.
Your studio reel is on your IMDb page if anyone wants to take a look, and it has a great variety of images and genres, some beautiful work, great lighting, interiors, exteriors. You have tremendous experience behind the camera. But here, as cinematographer and director, you have some different challenges. Your protagonist is in a wheelchair. Point of view is an issue in almost every scene. You must find thoughtful and creative camera angles. Besides shooting your lead at eye level in his wheelchair, you also have to consider when to shoot high angle or low angle, and to reveal different emotional states or relationships. How did you formulate a plan to shoot this different movie? And when you got on set, what happened?
So, at the very beginning of the process, I approach every single script I read the same way, whether it's directing or just shooting it. And I give the script a cold read. I let my mind go wherever it will, and then on subsequent reads, I really start to think about, the emotion of it and what the sort of story core of the scene is and how I want the audience to feel, and try to select, a camera philosophy, a cinematographic philosophy that reflects that approach and what's going to get the feeling across. Because really, that's the essence of storytelling is emotion telling. It's getting the audience to feel what the writer feels, or the director. And so the first thing was, this is a very subjective story. We are with Patrick in every single scene of the movie. We are connected to him, and we experience this world and this journey almost entirely through his eyes. So bringing the camera primarily to his eye level was the first thing. And it would be the same thing if I was telling, when I've made movies where there's a child protagonist, it's the same thing. You bring the eye line, or if it was a very tall person, you start with that as your baseline, and then you bring the camera. I brought the camera a little higher or a little lower, again, based on how Patrick was feeling in any particular scene. So if he's feeling big about himself, or his, feeling in charge or getting a big head, the camera comes down a little lower into a slightly more heroic angle. And if he feels small, or if he's being made to feel small, the camera tends to rise up to the eye level of the person who is making him feel that way, or even if he's by himself, because he feels that certain way. So that was the first philosophy. And then the second one was enhancing that feeling of being with Patrick emotionally. We built a rig. I had a key grip I'd worked with on a TV show called Z Nation. He and I'd spent 5 years working together, so we had a really good shorthand. He's someone I trust very, very, very implicitly. A guy named Dan Meisner. He helped me design and build it's basically a snorri cam, a rig that was locked to the wheelchair, so that anywhere that Toby moved in his chair, the camera moved in perfect sync with him, so that as he's like spinning out in the nightclub, or there's a particular stunt where we tipped his chair over and the camera goes with him in perfect sync. That should feel visceral. That's something that's designed to make the audience feel out of control and off balance with Patrick. And then, the lighting was the same philosophy. If it's really just trying to capture the emotional moment, the emotional space that Patrick is in.
I wonder, you do a great job. It does have a philosophy, and I think any, I mean, you're a cinematographer, I don't have to tell you this, but any movie that doesn't have a style that is set and sustained throughout the movie is in trouble. And it's often inexperienced directors who are just unaware of that, and the cinematographer doesn't force them into it, but both. And so you do it consistently, and it works really well. And also, I wonder if your film will make people think about how we look down at people in wheelchairs, because you don't do that.
What I hope is that they forget he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And they sort of forget that John has hooks. And that's actually, it's feedback we've gotten is that, after the first, 10 minutes of just adjusting to being in the world with these two characters, people stop seeing the disabilities. And if the best thing, my greatest hope for this film is that, or what the takeaway should be, is that these are just two people who could be related to any audience member. They could be it could be their brother or their son or their uncle or their father or their grandfather, and that they really feel like these are relatable characters. The beauty of this story for me was that you could have told this exact same story with two people from any background of any kind. You could have inserted any different two leads, and the story would have been the same. The experience of going on this journey of found family, of dealing with emotional trauma and finding forgiveness, and learning how to accept self and give and receive love, those are universal. And so it's not an esoteric story. It's not something that only an audience with a disabled audience will be able to appreciate. This should be something that everybody can enjoy, and that everybody can see a piece of themselves in these main characters, even though we have one in a chair and the other as a double amputee.
Yeah, I mean, I came to the movie thinking, well, how are you going to do that? What you just said you did, and you did it. You see it in the film very early on. Their disability is just not part of what you're thinking or what you're watching or what you're anticipating, and it really works well throughout. Kelli, I want to ask you. You have some very heavy subjects and themes that infuse the narrative with weight and humanity. Fatherhood, family, forgiveness, redemption, and overcoming all sorts of odds and obstacles. And as a writer, when you lay all that out in front of you, it's easy to step forward and trip all over it, or fall back on cliches, or rely on sentiment or pity or melodrama. How do you avoid all that stuff?
I think in earlier drafts of this script, I probably didn't. So I think that having, been in this story, and working in this world for, the 17 years that we worked on trying to bring it to life, the script went through many, many iterations. The shooting draft was never, the initial draft that I wrote. And I learned, and Alex learned. And what we did is we worked with groups, we worked with advocacy groups to make sure that, we didn't, make fun of the characters or humiliate them, or we didn't put them in situations that would be disrespectful. There are a couple of tropes. If you read Judy Heumann's white paper that she did with the Ford Foundation, she talks about, disability representation in media, and they typically fall into a couple of tropes. That's, the super crip, the one who has superpowers because of their disability. There's the villain, like they actually mentioned like the Joker, that's the kind of with his mental disability. And then there's the imbecile and the pitiable character. And I did not want to fall into those tropes. And I worked with John and I worked with Toby, and I made sure that, there were things in the script that, we cut a couple things from the script that, we were like, that actually is not, realistically how somebody would do that with this disability. One of the interesting things that happened about this, and I'm so sorry, our dog is trying to get into the pantry behind me, and it's a little distracting. So if you see the door slide open, our dog is getting into the pantry.
We've seen worse.
What's that?
We've seen worse.
Okay, I'm so sorry. He's just finished his breakfast and he wants a chicken snack. So I'm so sorry. But no, that's the way that we tried to avoid telling those stories. But we also, and so much as the camera angles don't shy away from the disabilities either, we infuse humor into this script. We had a couple of jokes in the script that we wanted to make sure stood because, we don't make fun of the characters, but there's a line in the script, John actually insisted that we keep this. He's helping Toby buckle the little girl into the car, and Toby can't do it. And John, double hand amputee, goes, "Need a hand?" And it gets a laugh every single time. But that's a way to sort of make the script, the own for the character. And it's not making fun of them at all. And every single time that line gets delivered, it gets the hugest laugh from the audience. And it's really wonderful what these actors have done.
Toby plays your protagonist, and again, this gets to avoiding these tropes. You're giving him a situation which I didn't expect. He's not a saint. He's a very flawed character. Not the typical kind of role that, as you said, audiences or the film industry expects to see, which is why you ran into what you ran into, and also as a writer, this gives you greater opportunities to have him grow as a character and achieve a greater arc, and he has a great character arc over the course of the film. But how did you go about casting your leads and addressing all that stuff with your casting process, and how did you get to these two guys who were so good?
We can two-hand this question if you want, honey.
Sure.
Go ahead. You can start.
Oh, you're speaking to your husband. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, Chuck, I've just met you.
Okay.
We actually shot a proof of concept for this in 2018 because we wanted to try and go the traditional route, and we wanted to show what we could do, and we wanted to show what we were capable of in the filmmaking style. So we actually put out a national casting call for two disabled leads. One, I had originally cast this as a paraplegic. I had written the story for a paraplegic, and then one with the double amputee. The talent pool, for disabled actors, it's getting bigger, but it's not huge because disabled characters, even though 1 in 4 people in the entire world identify as disabled, only represent about 2% of film and character depictions in the media. So it's very small. But like I said, it is getting better. But we went through this whole process of casting people sent in tapes, and then we got tapes from John and Toby. And they always really like to tell this interesting story because Toby had initially not submitted for the role because it was cast as a paraplegic. And I'll let you take this over, Alex, if you want to go from here.
John is very fond of telling the story that he got the audition, and he said it's the first time in his entire career that he had seen a casting call specifically for double amputee. He's seen plenty of roles for generic disability or amputee, but never specifically double amputee. So he was, he didn't know us. We didn't have any credibility in the community at that point, but he was interested. So he goes over to Toby's house because he and Toby are friends in real life and they live about a mile apart. He goes over to Toby's house and Toby reads for him off camera. And after they do the audition, he says to Toby, "Why don't you read for this?" And Toby says, "Oh no, they're looking for a para. It's not me." And John says, "Why don't you let them make that choice? Like, you read, you got nothing to lose." So Toby says, "I don't have sides." John said, "Just read the opposite read the opposite side of my scene, because it's the same, it's the same scene. He's in it also." So, it was like a day or two later, Toby calls John up, says, "John, I got a call back." John says, "I didn't." And then about 6 hours, a couple hours later, John got his call back. And then we met them in person for the first time. And they were definitely trepidatious, because again, they didn't know us, and we did not at that point have a tremendous amount of presence or credibility in the disability filmmaking community. But we worked over the course of the next year or 6 months until we shot the proof of concept, to develop it with them and build that trust, and really, consider their positions and their input, and help tailor the script we were shooting in that proof of concept for their specific disabilities and the particular elements of their conditions. And then, they were also our entree into the broader disability filmmaking community, and really introduced us and helped us access a much greater pool of resources and of talent and information and insight that helped us evolve the script and the process to make it as universally disability friendly as we possibly could.
Toby is very fond of saying that people have won Oscars for, having, portraying disabilities. And he said, "You two are the only geniuses in Hollywood that take someone who's disabled and make them more capable of doing things." Toby was very concerned, early on in the narrative, that we were not focusing on showing, transfers in and out of cars. We leave it a little up, to the audience to decide if there's a caregiver that comes in or not. We specifically did not want to tell those mundane beats of the story, because as we explain it, nobody cares about seeing Superman put his underwear on in the morning. They don't care. It's not relevant to the story. And Toby was very reluctant. And we spoke with him, and he trusted us. And by the time he finally saw the first cut of the film, he was like, "You guys were right." And I think that by intentionally leaving those stereotypical beats out, showing someone struggling, with having a disability, we have been able to make sure that what we focus on is not the things that people can't do, but the things that they can.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned the best years of our lives in the beginning, I mean, that's 80 years ago, almost 80 years ago, where you had an actor with a disability who got to act, not be held back by it. And really his conflict was social, not psychological. It was the other people that, and that's 80 years ago. And he won an Oscar, and
he won two.
Nothing since, or hardly anything since then. And again, but yours is different because the challenge is psychological, not social. So there's a lot of challenges here. And I want to also ask you, Kelli, because you have a role in the film. You play a social services worker, and you're in charge of handing over a 4-year-old kid to a father who is clearly an absolute mess. And I'm wondering, writing that character and then playing that character in the movie requires that you have to convince yourself, as writer and actor, and the audience, that what she is doing is the right thing to do, hopefully, at least. So what are your thoughts about writing and developing that character and playing that character and making her credible?
We spent a lot of time talking about that, because we felt that that was one beat in the story that, would be very hard to get people to buy into, because a lot of people are like, you do see Patrick, he's a mess. I mean, he womanizes, he goes out to strip clubs, he drinks, he's not really suitable. But the character's name is Caitlin, and in the film she's pregnant, and she's very heavily pregnant. She's going to have her own child within weeks of finishing up this case. We did a lot of research into what social services was, and the sort of like the foster care system, and it's not great. It's really not great. We listened to a lot of stories. We did a lot of research on this. How credible is this? And I felt that like making the character have her own child on the way and knowing that if she stepped away for a minute and did not have this child placed properly, the system was going to swallow her up. And she didn't want that to happen. And I think that the character of Caitlin saw something in Patrick, because again, I'm writing this because I have the personal experience and I could see something, and again, this is not based on a true story, but I could see the humanity in what this was, the character. And I wanted her to tap into that and say, you can man up and you can do this. And that's really where that came from. And we actually ran it past a couple of social workers. We ran it past people who work in the system, and they were like, yeah, this could happen. So really that's what it was. And I think Caitlin really wanted to make sure that Camilla, the little girl, wasn't going to be, falling victim to that if she stepped away, because she was about to go on maternity leave.
I want to say that your film, Daruma, after this long journey, will soon be in movie theaters and streaming. Check your local listings. Congratulations, Kelli and Alex, and thank you so much for joining us on Cinema Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuck.
Thanks for tuning in to Cinema Q&A. I want to thank Kelli McNeil-Yellen and Alex Yellen for making Daruma and sharing their story with us tonight. And please don't forget, if you get tired of algorithms running your life, Cinema Q&A will always be curated by a human being. I'm Chuck Rose, and I'll be back next week with another great film.